Nuances to acquisition offers. Most acquisitions, the things that are going to be highlighted or things you're going to hear about the most are going to be what was the purchase price? How much was paid for the company? What was that as a multiple of EBITDA even? However, as offers come in for the prospective sale of a business, there's lots of nuance, there's lots of intricacies that can enhance or detract from an offer, make something more appealing or less appealing. And while there's many of them, I want to talk about 5 nuances or elements of offers that you may not hear about talking to friends or reading articles about deals, but you're going to see quite often in the actual acquisition or business exit process. So the first of these is a working capital adjustment. So what does this mean? Is that when someone buys a company as an ongoing enterprise, the assumption is that the company has enough cash in the business to continue its operations. And so what people will often say is, I don't want to buy the company twice. I want to buy the company and not have to put in additional capital. If there's additional capital that needs to be put in, it effectively adds to the purchase price. And so when people sell their businesses, we've seen it both ways, where a buyer says all the cash needs to stay in the company, or a seller says I'm taking all of the cash out of the company. And in reality, it's usually some delineating line in between where there's an analysis, and it's a negotiated item, and we advocate on behalf of our clients zealously to minimize this, but there needs to be some level of cash left in the business such that it can continue operations. Now, if you've run a business for 25 years and the bank account for the business has just grown and you're not always inclined to sweep all the money out because you own the business, your family, or you and your investors, or you and your teammates and co-owners own the business, there can oftentimes be excess capital left in the business. Not all of that excess capital is working capital. So it's important to define it. It's important to minimize it to the level that, okay, we can substantiate that the business does not require immediate cash injections post-transaction, but at the same time, you're not leaving excess cash in the business that really isn't necessary to keep it operating. So working capital adjustments are always a negotiated item, always a nuance of acquisition offers, and something to keep in mind. Secondly, are seller notes. And so what do we mean by this? You'll hear the expression hold paper, hold a note. And so a private mortgage is a phrase that's kind of borrowed from the real estate sector, but often applied to corporations. But when someone sells a business, if they were to sell the business for $1 and the person buying it were to pay 80 cents at closing, instead of going out and finding third-party capital for that remaining 20%, oftentimes they will ask the seller to hold a note. And so that would be structured similar to a loan of over X amount of years at Y% interest to be paid off at Z amortization schedule. And so oftentimes it's used as a mechanism to A, make the deals more financeable for the buyers and allow them to pay a higher price, but B, at the same time, keep some level of alignment post-transaction for the seller and keep some skin in the game. Now, we don't like to see situations where it's 80% seller note, where we're not trying to sell a business as a free ride or free roll of the dice to a buyer, but oftentimes this will land somewhere between 10 and 20%, 10, 15%, depending on the situation of a particular transaction. Adding to that, number 3 is the concept of an earnout. So not to be confused with a seller note. A seller note is a guaranteed situation, so long as the business remains solvent, of an ongoing payment. Think of a debt of the business. An earnout, on the other hand, is a component of post-transaction consideration. So if someone again says, I'm going to buy your business for $1, I'm going to give you 50 cents at closing, and 50 cents will be given to you every year after the closing, and 25 cents will be given to you each of the following 2 years after the closing, so long as revenue hits this mark, so long as these clients are retained, so long as any number of other agreed upon things happen. Now, we made another video, we'll include the screenshot here, talking about earnouts and how we've really tried to minimize them and mitigate them to make them tantamount or effectively the same as a seller's note. However, there still are situations that have warranted earnouts, whether it be conversion of clients, things of that nature, where there is a set path to take place after closing, where we feel highly confident it's going to take place. But something to keep in mind, an earnout is often part of that overall transaction structure. And although similar to a seller note, it's not always the same thing. Number 4 is the employment contract / non-compete. And so oftentimes when someone sells a business, they are asked to not compete with the business for a certain amount of time, within a certain geography, within a certain industry. That's not to be unexpected, but oftentimes it also has a contractual element of employment or involvement on a post-transaction basis. Now, we try to shift these to more tapering consulting agreements with limited responsibilities. At times, buyers will ask for a longer duration and even try to make part of the earnout contingent on some of these requirements. And that's where things can be negotiated and things can get sticky, and you really need to make them crisp, clean, sometimes mutually exclusive, and really negotiate it down to an availability, if you will, and an input on an as-needed basis. But something to keep in mind is that all transactions, for the most part, will have some element of post-transaction involvement, oftentimes taking the shape of an employment agreement, non-disclosure, some amalgamation of both. So we talked about numbers 4 and 5 together there, but these are the 5 nuances that you'll oftentimes see in acquisition offers. To run through them again: working capital adjustments, seller notes, earnouts, employment contracts, and non-competes. And what does this really map to? It really is the 4 components of offers that we've discussed in previous videos. So we said value, structure, transition, and stakeholders. And so if you really map these nuances of variables, they support different elements of it. And so what we mean by this is value, working capital adjustments impact value, whether positively or negatively. Structure, seller notes or earnouts, things that bifurcate what you get at closing versus what you get over time, really play into the overall structure of a deal. Non-competes and employment contracts relative to ownership or the selling owners correlate directly with the transition period or the transition requirements post-transaction. And similarly, the employment contracts for the employees of the company correlate with the stakeholders. So we say offers have 4 main components: value, structure, transition period, stakeholders, meaning employees largely. And within that, these are 5 nuances that you will see as part of these offers and all the main categories of the respective offers. And so there are many other considerations and variables, but the more educated you can get on what you're likely to see in an offer, the more you're going to be able to advocate on your behalf. Also, working with firms like ours, being able to be most effective in optimizing the offers across all variables, not just what people read about, not just EBITDA multiples, but the key details that can oftentimes differentiate a good deal from an excellent deal. So that's a thought for today. Hope the week continues to go well for everyone. Keep pushing forward. God bless. See everyone next time.